Now, as you know, when we put somebody in the spotlight, it's probably 20% about the issues, but more so about just reflecting on their life, and that's what we're certainly going to do with Anne Pratt. So, Anne, great chatting to you. Thanks for coming to the studio.
Thank you, Ashraf. Great to be here.
Let's talk about you. I mean, just in sort of broad strokes, career highlights. There may be many, but if you bring it down to maybe 2 lines, they're what?
I think firstly my career in Unilever, having a great grounding in a brilliant multinational that taught me the basics in marketing. I think also in the work I do currently as an executive search consultant headhunter, I have the privilege of meeting phenomenal great leaders in the country, hearing their life story and what's made them successful, and it's very humbling.
It must be interesting because while you're trying to place them and find them, put them somewhere else, you're actually learning so much about just their attitude, their mentality, and of course, I presume you're dealing with high-profile personalities within your companies, right?
Absolutely.
People you place.
Yeah, very much so. And also business cases in terms of what they've done, how they've done it, what they've achieved, so there's a tangible, practical side to who they are, and then, of course, the human being, You
know the old story about accountants, and may not apply to you directly, is that accountants inevitably know exactly which businesses to start, because having done analysis of all their clients, they know who's making money and who's not making money.
Yeah, I think that's true. And we certainly get a lot of strategic insight into organizations and their challenges.
What about low lights for you? Career low lights, yeah.
Career low lights. Well, I think that's a philosophical issue. I mean, I think things that started off as a low light became a highlight. I think when I moved from Lever Brothers to McCann Retail, the pace of the environment and the dynamics was so challenging, by comparison, 8 months launching a campaign from brief to flighting to in retail, where you kind of turn that around in a day. So I think that was very stressful, but, like most things in life, I believe we turn adversity into opportunity, and it ended up being one of my greatest teachers in terms of operating in a very different dynamic environment.
Now, I do a media and marketing show on a Sunday morning. You should probably listen in 9 to 11,
okay.
Right? And, of course, we talk to all the major players in the industry now, yes. Right? And one of the things that comes out, not just there, but anywhere else, that no matter what else you do in your life, you must be able to market. Even if I have to quote the DA, possible parliamentary leader tomorrow, the incumbent Athol Trollop, he said it's important to market.
Yeah.
What sort of lessons did you learn then at Unilever that you then applied to just about everything else you've done since?
Well, I think I've been hugely impacted by my training there. I think, if you look at Unilever business, the marketing plans are really the business plans. So I take that paradigm and apply it to any business I'm involved in. I think on a personal note, I think everybody is a brand, and how we position ourselves as a brand, the same principles apply. So, I really, I'm pretty ingrained in the marketing thinking and paradigm, and I think I apply it in business and personally.
So in terms of the work now, where you are placing high-level executives in the main, you want to mention names?
Well, yeah, we previously placed the CEOs of MTN Africa, Lazarus Zim. We placed Safisa Debengwa. We placed board members onto the Tiger board, Makuba Nyama, Maya Makanjia. Interestingly, we also placed some of the directors onto the Avusa board that have gone through recent turmoil, so just to name a few.
And the chances of placing a new president, we're beyond that at the moment, or light years away from that sort of thing happening, I should say.
Well, on an interesting note, Ashraf, I mean, often I have this debate around dinner tables around if we had to do a shortlist for CEO of South Africa, who would we put on it and why? So that is a conversation we often have, but certainly the protocols and processes don't.
Of course. So what's the dinner table answer to that one?
Well, lots of debates. But I think, and not that, and I've said this to my good friend Dr. Mampela Rampele, I'd love to put her on a shortlist, for CEO of South Africa. I think she represents all the requisite competencies and attributes, and so yeah. That's somebody I would certainly have near the top of our
It's amazing how often her name gets mentioned amongst many people when they talk about a true South African leader. Right, lots more to talk about with Anne Pratt, Director of Memela Pratt and Associates. Again, if you want to just comment, somebody's saying Anne is an amazing woman. I know her personally, and she's a highlight to us all. So why don't you tell us who you are? Because you're rather anonymous, and I'd love it if you tell us via SMS if you want to, 34701, or even better, if you just call in and say, hi, Anne, you know me, because we do really know each other. We'll talk more to Anne Pratt right after this.
As I woke up this morning,
More in the spotlight after this.
afternoon talk on SAFM.
Right, so Anne Pratt is very much in the spotlight. In terms of your business, we'll talk about some of the personal things later on, but just in terms of your business, is it more difficult now or easier to do business? Because you clearly have to have the type of names that you just mentioned, the formidable names. You have to have them on your books to be able to place them elsewhere, right? In a supply and demand scenario, would it be a case of less demand, therefore less supply?
Well, I think in terms of doing business, Ashraf, I think, go back to the marketing paradigm. I think it's about building brands over time and building credibility. And I think, our business has been around since the 1st of May 1998, and I think, we really developed a credible track record in caring about transformation in this country, wanting to find the best, most competent leaders who have courage, who have integrity, and people who also have a passion to change the country. And I think if you consistently treat people that way, it's one thing to say what we're about, it's another thing to be what we're about. And I think, when there's an alignment, we build trust and we build credibility. So over time, I think we found it easier. We have long-standing relationships with all of our clients, and our candidates are equally our clients. So there's a goodwill relationship built over time. So when we do have something relevant that we think would create a great marriage between them and an organization, it's easier to pick up the phone and say, I'd like to chat.
And these individuals, as opposed to companies, I mean, what percentage of these individuals are headhunted versus actually saying, I need another job, please find me one?
Well, I think it's at the top end. They're very much headhunted. I think what we find at middle management level, often those are people actively looking for jobs. There's an interesting dynamic in the industry that often if we have a search and people are being headhunted, if they're anxious and active applicants, sometimes that puts the client off because they think, well, we don't want somebody who's kind of desperately looking for a job or needing a new job. We want the people that aren't necessarily looking. And that's an interesting dynamic and has to be carefully managed.
But are they right in thinking that way?
Well, I don't think it's one size fits all. I think sometimes there are people, because of personal circumstances or work circumstances, that really do need to make a change, and sometimes they're very, very good people. There are often valid reasons why people leave organizations.
Because, we often get told about, don't just knock on the door, sort of knock that door down. So isn't that top executives taking their assertiveness to the logical end?
Yeah, I think that is true. But I think in terms of knocking doors down, I think to cut it in our industry, we've got to be pretty persuasive and influential. So often people say, well, hang on, I'm really not interested. And if I can quote an example, my good friend Professor Shirley Zinn, when she was at Nedbank, I don't know how many times I called Shirley. I said, Shirley, this is a great challenge for you to move to Standard Bank as Deputy Global Head of HR and Head of South Africa. And yeah, it was us knocking her door down to say, come on, Shirley, come and have an open, no strings attached conversation. And, eventually it paid off.
Can you give us some more insights into those type of, tradings or movements that you can, that is not very, very private?
Just to clarify?
Yeah, just in terms of insights into other people like that, sort of where you had to persuade certain people to move and they didn't move or they finally moved, if you can.
And sorry.
In terms of the background,
yes,
like the many calls you made,
yes,
were there others like that you can talk about?
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, sorry. I think at the time Safiso, when he was at Eskom, in terms of making a move to MTN, he was doing very well at Eskom, very settled. That also took a few calls and a few conversations, and and I think, right now, and this is public knowledge, we are handling the MD of AXA assignment, and not to mention the name because that's not yet known, but, there is an individual that we said, look, just keep an open mind. I think I've probably had 3 or 4 conversations with her. and it's about, keeping your options open and also make an informed decision. And sometimes we never know in life how things come back in a positive way. And so even if it doesn't work out, the fact that people have met high-profile people on boards and those boards have had exposure to them, often there's a win much further.
Even if it doesn't really work out, there's still a win.
Absolutely.
But when there's a lose, how much of that then comes back to you? Because when we're dealing at entry level or middle management, it's a different level completely. Here we're talking of absolute top executives, captains of industry, right?
Yes.
They have to deliver. They have to turn inevitably companies around and grow them far bigger.
Yeah.
So your responsibility is absolutely huge.
It is huge, and I must be honest, we take our work very seriously, but also are very inspired by it, and we realize that I think inspired in the sense that if we can facilitate a happy marriage between a great leader and a leading organization in this country in our own way, we're also contributing to the change and the performance of South Africa.
And your recipe for success is what?
In the context of the business or personally?
Well, business first, we'll go personal next.
Okay. I think in the context of the business, it's about always living by our values. I think secondly, it's about speed of turnaround without compromising quality. I think it's about building an ongoing goodwill relationship with organizations and individuals, our candidates, no matter where the market's at. I think often people make the mistake, if there's a high demand for good people, they err on the side of staying in touch with good people, but when there's an oversupply of people, then they err on the side of staying in touch with the organization. And I think our success has been equally staying in touch with both and treating them equally over time.
Okay, lots more to talk about, certainly, as I put Anne Pratt in the spotlight. She's a director of Memela Pratt and Associates, and as you've heard, they're very much in recruiting at the top end of the market, the absolute captains of industry. We're going to get into some of the personal issues in her life, and again, if you want to continue SMSing or pick out some of the other comments, or anytime you want to call in, just remember that. Do that with pleasure. 0891104207. I particularly like it if perchance you happen to have worked with Anne Pratt or studied with her, maybe went to the same schools as well, or are related in any way, or maybe you were headhunted and as a result of that headhunting you got a job. So if that's what you want to do, you certainly can do so as well. Let's talk about where it all started for you. Where were you born?
I was born in Pretoria. I moved to Durban when I was 5 days old. I'm actually an adopted child. So my adopted family came to fetch me straight after birth, and really grew up in Durban and Pietermaritzburg.
So that's been home virtually from day one?
Yeah.
And your early school days, give us an insight into that.
Well, I went to convents. I grew up in a Catholic family, and like good Catholic families, we got sent to convents, and I think again that had many pluses and some minuses. But
tell me about them. The pluses and the minuses.
The pluses is, I think the nuns, there was an incredible sense of structure and support, and they were German nuns, very strong on discipline, and I think I was a bit of a rebel child. Okay. So at times, kind of that presented its own challenges. I think some of the minuses. I think, it was a very regimented environment, and sometimes not all nuns with German training and background understood developing the free spirit of a child, whilst at the same time ensuring that there's good discipline, etc. So that presented it.
So with hindsight, right decision or wrong decision?
I think
not that it was your choice, but
again, Ashraf, I just think life turns out the way it's meant to be. So I think I was in the right place at the right time. I think it shaped me well, and went on to Pinetown Convent, and I think there, I found the nuns a little more flexible and had some great teachers.
Is there one or two individual teachers that you can remember that made a mark in your life?
Yeah, I think again on the plus side, I remember Sister Sheila in Standard 2. Boy, she was tough. And at times, and I think I was a tough child to teach. So, I was probably at times spent more time out of the classroom. But I think just learning about how best to handle children of that nature that are strong-willed and free-spirited. I think at Pinetown Convent, Sister Saviour in Standard 5, just a gentle woman, great teacher, really encouraged us, egged us on, and very, very positive.
And any contact have you retained, A, with the teachers and B, with those schools?
Not really, but I have retained contact with my high school. I went to Girls Collegiate in Maritzburg, and I've been back to visit the school. Our late headmistress, Dorothy Clarkson, passed on. I drove down to Maritzburg to be at her funeral just to really honour and thank her. A remarkable woman who was probably ahead of her time.
And were there students in your class, if not at primary, then certainly at high school, that you may remember, you want to talk about now, people who've made their mark in other industries?
Well, I think, the one that immediately comes to mind, Janet Tate, who was Dux in our final year collegiate, incredibly bright woman, went on to become a NASA scientist. I think she's done amazing things. I think others have kind of excelled in their own way. But I think what Janet did, on the global stage has been phenomenal.
So at that time when you're growing up, what was your ambition? When you get big, when I get big, I want to become what? What did you say?
Interestingly, Ashraf, it changed significantly. I actually really wanted to be a medical doctor. My mother worked in the medical profession. My late aunt taught at Wits Medical School. To be honest, I then sort of realized I can't stand the sight of blood. It became
not the only one.
So I really thought I'd be a medical doctor.
And then, but when you got into marketing, was that part of the plan, or was that by default?
It was by default. I actually did an honours degree in industrial psychology. My plan was to be an industrial psychologist, and 4 weeks before the end of my final year, one of my professors said to me, and she knew me pretty well, and she said, you, Professor Linda Stratham, she said, you're going to be very bored. You need something a lot more dynamic and interesting. And within the space of a couple of weeks, I read up on the 4 Ps of marketing, and Geneva were coming around to do all their graduate recruitment processes. And I thought, need to be single-minded, focused, and really in a couple of weeks I'd sort of changed strategic direction. But yeah.
So, and with hindsight, was that the right advice you received?
I think it was, definitely.
Okay, well, sometimes you need that, someone to point it out to you, indeed. Well, just say we'll take your calls. We'll take them in a few moments' time, so maybe just hold that for now. There are a few SMSs I want to pick out, however. Got some interesting things that, some questions that we've had asked. Let me just see if I can get that. Okay, we'll get that in a second. We'll get to that just in a few moments' time. So then from Unilever, let's talk about the current business. How did that start for you?
I was head of marketing for Whirlpool Appliances, part of KRC Gentech, owned by PowerTech, which is owned by Ultron. And at the time, I was actually called for a GM position with Borden Foods, and I was also on the shortlist with Rennick for Southern Sons who were looking for entrepreneurial MBAs.
Okay.
And I thought, well, building hotels in the Indian Ocean Islands would take me back to my coastal roots. And But anyway, I didn't get that job. An engineer got that position. And then the MD of Rennick said, why don't you come in and do recruitment? And I said, well, I'm not really a touchy-feely type. HR is not really where I've gone. And anyway, at the same time, I met Trevor Woodburn at the Wits Business School alumni meeting.
Right.
And he said, come and talk to me about starting a business in opposition to Rennick, which I did. I started Woodburn Management Selection. And the rest is history.
But he said, come and talk to you, meaning that you asked him or he asked you initially?
No, he asked me. He knew I'd disclosed that I'd been approached by Woodburn and I'd been interviewed by another of their consultants. And then that I was talking to Rennick, and he said, well, come and talk to us about a position with Woodburn.
Interesting. There's someone, and this is critical, from Barry. So how can you give airtime to a person who spends their days stealing stuff from honest companies? She's a thief, plain and simple. So perception is everything here. Your response?
Yeah, I think, the truth is people are always looking for new career strategic opportunities. It's always about personal choice. And we have very high codes of ethics. We never take people out for clients we work with. And the truth is we have a lot of integrity in our process about whether this is the right opportunity for the individual to make a change. And, people have choices in life, and I would like to ask that person, I'm sure there are times when they want to make career changes. And
what do they do?
What do they do?
And sometimes when you're just waiting for that call, and well, then obviously you are there anyway, right? When did you realize that you made it in this industry?
I think, getting phone calls from leading organizations in South Africa asking us to come and help them with key assignments for top leaders. We were called by the Nelson Mandela Foundation, their board, to come and pitch for that. Tutsi Mamela, my great friend, long-lasting friend and business partner, we pitched for that together. We were very inspired to get that position and very grateful that we could make a contribution. We actually in fact, we brought Ahmad Dangle back from overseas.
Oh, so you're responsible. Okay, now we know.
Yes, yeah. And I think, a call from the Transnet chairman, the previous chairman, Fred Peswana, asking us to help Transnet replace Maria Ramos. So I think, when these leading organizations call us, and we were recently called by AXA to help them,
you're doing something right.
Yeah.
But there must have been a day, that obviously happened later, but earlier on, with all new businesses, there's got to be this tipping point, this one day where you get that one assignment that actually changes things, isn't it?
Do you're right. When I was MD of Woodburn, I was working with MTN, and in fact, Paul Norman actually called me and asked me to help them with finding their new group marketing director. So I think taking up the game to that level, and that was a significant day, and I'm eternally grateful to Paul and MTN.
So in fact, it wasn't just the marketing director who was hired, you were hired in terms of your expectations. That sort of raised the bar for yourself as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Indeed, lots more to talk about as we chat to Anne Pratt, putting her in the spotlight. I did still get your calls. We just sort of delayed that for a while so we can get into some of the personal issues, but we will take some of the calls now, in fact. 0891 104 207, 0891 104 207. Your thoughts, your comments, your anecdotes, your questions, your criticisms as well. All that certainly most welcome. Whether Anne welcomes it, we'll find out in a moment. Right now, 3:30, time for the news headlines. Right, so my guest is Anne Pratt. She's in the spotlight. We do that up to 3:45. We do in the spotlight every day, of course, from 3 to 4:45. Tomorrow we chat to Jimmy Dludlu. Make a note of that one. Should be really interesting. Let's get to the callers. 0891 104 207. You have that. Make a note. Save the number 0891 104 207. Let's go to Emmanuel first up. Is it Phosphorus? Hi, Emmanuel.
Good afternoon, Ashraf.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Phosphorus.
Yes, go for it.
Yes. Good. Ashraf, just 3 quick questions. Number one, I need your guest to actually differentiate between her business and labor broking one. And number two, it seems to be an interest of many stakeholders in the country to do away with labor brokers. To what extent is this going to affect her business? And lastly, Ashraf, she mentioned that she also handles SOE accounts. And my question around this is, to what extent do politics play a role in this regard? Thanks, Ashraf, for listening on the radio.
Okay, interesting question. Thanks for that, Emmanuel. The first two, I thought you were from Kosato, but you never know. Maybe you are. Right, response there?
Yeah, thank you for those questions. I think up front, let me just say I'm not an expert in labour broking per se. It's normally a different segment of the market. But certainly from what I've seen and read, there is a lot of contention in terms of employment in South Africa. And yes, there are new, there's a green paper out in terms of how we manage that better. And I think it's a very tough issue, because I think on the one hand, I think it is about economics, and I think it is about supply and demand. And I think, if you look at the World Competitiveness Report, South Africa has dropped in the rankings. And one of the big issues around that, and also people wanting to invest in the country, is the inflexibility of our labour market. So I think it's a very complicated issue. I think on the other hand, there is a social mandate. We are as a country trying to improve employment, alleviate poverty. And as I say, I think it's a complicated issue, and I think there needs to be a healthy balance, a healthy tension between the economic factors and wanting to alleviate poverty in the country. I think, sorry. If
no, you carry on. Carry on. If you wanted to say more. Is that it?
Well,
okay. For now, we'll see. What about your thoughts in terms of the expectations of the country to deliver? And we spoke about the DA earlier on, about the need to deliver captains of industry who are black, because of the need to obviously to transform this country and to do so at a huge pace. I mean, is there pressure on you as in your company, Mamela Pratt and Associates, to deliver?
Absolutely. I think, and we've seen that change over time. I think, early on, closer to 94 and post-94, it was really about diversity with white women and people of all color. Now the briefs are very much strong pressure to find African black people. And again, I can understand it because, if we look at our transformation track record, it's not been great. Yes, there are pockets of excellence, but generally there's a lot more to do. So, yes, there is pressure. And sorry, just to come back to one of the other questions the previous caller asked in terms of state-owned enterprises. Right. Yes, there is pressure. Those organizations, they're key shareholders, often the state, and they need to be walking the talk, in terms of legislation. But what I have experienced, which I think is very encouraging, is that, yes, it is about transformation, but it's also about meritocracy. In no way do we get a sense that we have to put people in because of color. And the truth is, there are some very, very good, competent people of color out there, and very competent African black people.
And they need to deliver. In terms of their companies, they have to deliver.
Yeah, so at no point in time in working with these state-owned enterprises have we ever picked up a sense that we will compromise performance delivery for race and color.
Right, lots more. I see there's an anonymous caller, but it's she's gone away. So if you want to call back, 0891104207, and Pratt in the spotlight. Let's talk about, I know in terms of other issues, you're also involved with that International Women's Business Forum. What's the acronym?
International Women's Forum of South Africa.
Okay. So you're one of many, and it's amazing how each one of them are just absolutely talented at the top of their profession, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's it like for you to be part of that?
Well, I think it's a privilege. You get nominated, and there are selection criteria, and it's really preeminent women around the world, so it connects us globally. There are 5,000 top women leaders in business and government internationally, and we've had the privilege of being exposed to people like the ex-president of Ireland, Mary Robinson, just the caliber and being, understanding what these women have done to get where they are. Many role leaders who kind of help us along our way, and hopefully we're passing that on to many of the South African women coming up through the ranks.
I want to go back to the issue of your top executives. There's been this debate, and it's an ongoing thing, that they just earn far too much money, totally disproportionate to the needs of the country, to the needs of the masses. I mean, your thoughts on that? Because I may then suggest that if anybody's going to drive the price up, it's going to be you.
Again, complicated. I am an economics graduate, so I'm very much schooled in the principles of supply and demand, and the price gets set by the market. And I think to a large extent that is the case. So the truth is, if I call people to say, will you consider this opportunity? And by the way, will you consider it for a salary cut? We're not going to get a great response. And I think also, Ashraf, I think the values of the country are not supporting it. We're in a period of conspicuous consumption. It tends to be an era of materialism and greed to a large extent. And I think when the leadership of the country is not supporting what Madiba did and led by example when he was president, where he took a portion of his income, put it into charity, set up his 3 foundations, we need more of that leadership to support that general trend in the country.
To what degree do you factor in ethics outside of business, that sort of ethics and morality and just a consciousness when you're looking at top executives?
Very high on our radar screen. I mean, I think, again, and our own value proposition is to help organizations find competent people who have integrity and courage and a passion to make a difference from a business point of view, but also from a social point of view. And for us, those qualities and leaders, and every year for many years, I've done the last lecture for the Gibbs MBA class, and I talk about the MBA and how that positions them. And yes, an MBA is great in schooling us in IQ and technical competence, but our own model of great leadership is about being a balanced leader with great intellectual competence, practical intelligence, a spiritual and an emotional intelligence. And I think those are the kinds of leaders that we believe this country needs. You asked me at one point who one of my favorite politicians is. Minister Praveen Gordhan. I've had the privilege of meeting him. He certainly lives the qualities of all of those aspects of intelligence, and our country needs more of them.
And some may say was the chief sheriff for a long time, sort of collecting all our taxes. Anyway, he did that for a while. Let's. I want to move on to some other issues. The MBA, how important was that for you? You studied that at WITS, right?
Yeah, it was life-changing, I think, for me. It gave me a language, a business language, where I could comfortably talk to people from all disciplines. I think in the work that we do now, it's given me a language to talk to all top executive directors. I think in our own business, it's given me a broad understanding of what it takes to run a business and make it successful.
What do you say to people who are entrepreneurial, who say sometimes just, too much studying is just not good enough? And I've had people sitting in the same hot seat as you and almost saying that it's a complete waste of time.
I think that's probably taking it a little far. I think there are those great entrepreneurs who are natural entrepreneurs, and I think for them that's been wonderful. But I think even business schools are recognizing it. GIBS have an entrepreneurial MBA. And, again, I think that's where the PQ comes into it. We're very big on practical intelligence. So unless we can take the textbook and translate it into a tangible reality at the rock face, yes, I understand that point.
Yeah. Otherwise, it does become too academic. Let's move into other things personally. We've got about 3 or 4 minutes to go. If you had the choice, very topical what we're talking about, if you had a choice to host your own radio or TV show, what would you be doing? What would you want to do?
Ashraf, ironical serendipity. I'm busy talking to a TV station right now as we speak about launching a show in the country, profiling pockets of excellence. And those are the sung and the unsung heroes. And I think we need more of those practical examples to not only give hope that there are those leaders out there, that they're delivering, but also insights and lessons about what they do, how they do it, to share the learnings, to share the support systems, the role models.
Okay, so we're very much in sync on that one day. If you were president for the day, what would be your first order of business?
Sure. Tough question. I think what I'd want to do is to get my cabinet around me and really highlight what the critical issues are, but what can be driven in a way that will make a tangible difference. And I think part of what I would do is try and understand the values of the people in my team.
Okay, let's some other things. Is there a career-defining book that you've read that you'd like to recommend?
I think 2, Leadership When the Heat Is On by Hoover and Cox, and I think the other one by Bob Garrett is The Fish Rots from the Head.
Okay, and it's amazing how many people have mentioned sort of similar names, so they certainly stick out. Are you cliched? Is there a phrase you use every single day, ever so often?
Keep it simple and smart. And I think that goes back to what you're saying about, don't be over analytical and textbook orientated. Keep it simple, keep it smart, cut through the clutter of complexity, but drill down to the critical issues.
Okay, we've got like 30 seconds to go, so we have to keep it simple and short as well. If you had to have, an autobiography, what would you like to have it titled?
The Other Side of the Rainbow.
Okay, we should have struck the rainbow as well, isn't it? Okay, good one. Right, just the last one. How would you like people to remember you?
I think as a woman of courage and integrity, a woman with a passion to contribute to the change of South Africa, but with a human heart and a woman who was able to connect at grassroots level in a very down-to-earth way.
And some may say that's absolutely true anyway. Anne Pratt, great chatting to you, and it's been fantastic having you in the spotlight.
Thank you so much.
Indeed. Anne Pratt.